Hello, and welcome to the 6th episode of Adding the Alchemy. I am Angie, and I am a board certified holistic health practitioner with Adding the Good Things.
And I am Angela, the energetic alchemist, and I help people to transform their energetic blueprint to receive everything that they desire in life.
All right, very good. Today we are going to talk about some things and processes that have been going on for me in this past week, and just share a little bit about when life kind of hits us out of left field, what we do about it and how we process it and how we get through it. So I think I want to start with an analogy that that came to me a few days ago. And those of you who like old school cartoons, my Gen X people out there, y'all will really relate to this. But if you think about like old school Looney Tunes, not new Looney Tunes, but old school Looney Tunes, like original Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd, Daffy Duck, all that. And what's in my head is like they're playing a baseball game, and one of them is running the bases, and not real fast, but just kind of like chugging along, going through first, going through second, thinking they're doing good. They're about to get to home plate and all is well. And then out of nowhere, this fastball comes and smacks them in the head. It knocks them to the ground. Their head is going all crazy. Their eyeballs are flipping circles all over the place. And they're just trying to regain their composure and see straight. That is a really good depiction of something that occurred in my life over the last few days. And while I'm not going to share the details of the experience, the specifics of what the fastball that hit me in the head was, I think that this can still apply to any scenario where you are going through life and you think all is well, and you get hit out of left field with something that is totally unexpected, and it really knocks you for a loop, and it takes you down, and it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So as I experienced this, and I was trying to process what had happened and my feelings on the matter, it was really like a grieving process. The different things that I went through, the different emotions that I felt, it was very much the stages of grief. And I will tell you that there was no death involved. Okay, there was no death involved. It was just, it was a grieving in my soul. And I went through the shock first, then the pain and the anger. The pain and the anger were kind of intertwined, probably more anger first than pain, but those two kind of intertwine and go back and forth. Then just a deep sadness. And once those initial really hard emotions cleared, I was able to look at things from a more logical perspective. Because when we're in those really hard emotions, when we're in that anger, when we're in that pain, when we're in that shock, our frontal lobe is not operating properly. We really are not thinking clearly at all. And we have to clear out those initial emotions before we can begin to think properly. So for a couple of days, I just sat in it. I just sat in the anger and in the pain and let it be what it was. I didn't try to fight it. I just let myself feel all of it. And because I let myself feel all of it, it actually passed quicker than if I had tried to shove it down and ignore it. So then I got to the point where I could think logically about the situation and see it for what it was and understand it a little more clearly. and then come to a point of acceptance. And I didn't realize until after I had gone through all these steps that it was actually a grieving process. When I was in the middle of it, I didn't see it like, oh, I'm grieving this. I consider this a loss of some sort that I'm grieving. I didn't see it as that until I could see things clearly, and that logic turned on, and I could see it more for what it was. So I think that it's important for us to allow ourselves to go through this process. When we experience these things that hit us out of nowhere, that we're not expecting, that cause us pain, if we can choose to just shove it aside, shove it down, and say, oh, well, and keep on going. But that's not going to help us heal. That's not going to help us evolve. That's not going to help us get to where we need to go. So allowing ourselves to sit in it and feel it and process it and cry through it and yell through it and do whatever we have to do is really where we're going to have the healing that we need to have.
Yeah, I've been going through a situation lately that has been bringing up a lot of anger. And ever since I was a child, showing anger was not something that I was allowed to do. And I saw people in my world being angry and not wanting to hurt people like they did, or not wanting to yell. And, so I wanted to be the opposite of that. So for much of my adult life, I had a lot of anger stored inside of me that I didn't really feel, and I wouldn't allow myself to feel. And so when I notice when things are just like out of balance and, my world is just kind of like meh, that there's something that I'm holding on to that I need to release, and I'm not feeling and sitting with those emotions like I should be in order to move forward. So, I go throughout my life and I watch for triggers, and usually it's through other people, something that someone else would say or do to me or whatever. And instead of, this is like taking personal responsibility. So this processing piece for me was about really taking the responsibility for what is inside of me. So, when these triggers come about, I had to learn to not be reactive towards people. And I actually had to apologize to someone earlier today because I had been a little snippy yesterday when all of this anger was coming out, and I was working through it. And, so I have to be very mindful of not taking that out on other people. So my process with the anger, like I use the tapping method. I've talked about it many times, the rapid relief technique, and it helps to remove the top layer of that so I can see what's underneath it. And so in my processing, I have to look at every piece of I have to start with the anger and look at the anger and tap it out and look at it and feel it. Like you said, you sit with it for days, and, I do things like I punch my bed, or I scream into a pillow, or I lay on the ground and flail my arms and legs because, when that anger takes over, it's almost like that inner child is running the show. That inner child that wanted to be loved, that wanted to be accepted, that wanted, all of these things is now running the show. So to go back to those things that a child would do, it actually is very soothing when you're going through this anger. So my thing is, I punch my bed when I get really angry and all of that. So then when I go into like the sadness part and like the grief and the it's more like just crying and hugging myself and just letting it flow. I think one of the biggest issues with during this processing time is that we try to make sense of what's coming out. We try to make sense of the emotions, but emotions are not logical in any way. So if you're trying to explain them away or think like, oh, well, what am I actually crying about? You may not come up with an answer. And if you do come up with an answer, it may sound really crazy to your logical mind, but to your emotional self, to that inner child self, this is exactly what I was feeling at the time. So I always give this example of processing is, I have a dog, and when I would let her outside, I would call her to come back in and she would never listen to me. And I used to get super, super frustrated by this. Like, first, I might have told this story in our podcast before, but I got super frustrated and I had to take personal responsibility for that frustration. See, and I don't live with other humans, so I don't have the chance to take that out on them. And I had to go through and process that not being heard. So it was that inner child that not being heard that was actually being triggered. It had nothing to do with the dog. It had nothing to do with any of that. This was my inner child feeling like she was not being heard. And so I had to sit with that and look at that. And that's how, personal responsibility is really important in situations where you're super triggered. So I think, but that's like the most difficult part, I think. Once you can really start to see, like, once you take the personal responsibility, you can really start to see what you are creating in situations that even maybe you don't want, or situations that you've been living out for years and years and years. How are you creating your own piece of that? How are you co-creating that situation? And then processing that. So I just kind of like live my life, and when a trigger comes up, it's obviously it's time to go to my next level, and this is what is in my way. This is what I need to look at in order to, because the easiest and quickest way to go to the next level is the emotions. Emotions are everything. And that's how we communicate with the universe or God. The universe, God, it doesn't know words. There's no logical brain thinking there at all. It's all about the feelings. So that's how we up-level our life. That's how we process. That's all of the things. The emotions are super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you said that you just go on and live your life, and when a trigger comes, you deal with whatever comes up. And that's very much the case, but sometimes it's a little one, and sometimes it's
absolutely
the baseball to the head.
Yep.
And so, but I think it's important, big or small, that you definitely allow yourself to process those emotions and to sit in it, and also not to judge yourself for it. And there's also a fine line between not taking out things on people that in ways that you know are wrong. There's that, but then there's also expressing your truth. Because now, if you're angry about something, if you're triggered about something, and then you're taking it out on a coworker, and it has absolutely nothing to do with them, that's one thing. But I think it's very important for us to be able to express the fact that we are hurt in a healthy way to the other person involved. That's part of how we do aligned, healthy relationships. You don't necessarily have to take it out on them in a negative way, but you need to be able to express yourself clearly, because if you don't let them know how you feel and why you feel that way, it's never gonna necessarily close that loop.
And I think too, in that is, it's a difference of reacting and being able to sit with it. Because yes, when someone comes at me with something and it makes me very angry, the lashing out part would just be like blaming everything, like, why did you do this, blah, 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 blah. rather than like in my situation, you know, with like a friend that I have, when we get into an argument, I'll say like I need a second. I need to step back. I need to look at the anger. I need to tap. I do the tapping. I tap it out. I look at what is under it. What is actually going on at an energetic level here? Because more times than not, it's not going to be the surface level thing. It's probably never the surface level thing. You know, it's not somebody cutting me off when I'm driving and me yelling out the window. You know, it's there's something deeper there. So if I can step back, you know, it's different in a close relationship. Whereas like if someone triggers me, I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to look at that. And then I'm going to come back and say, okay, I was very upset. This is what I thought you are saying. And it triggered me. Is this what you meant? Or is this, and this is the communication, like this is why they say communication is so important. And it's not just communicating as in like, how you doing? Good. Okay. Like, what's up with your day? Like, that's not, yes, that's communicating, but that's not the communicating that is like the foundational piece of relationship. This is to be able to sit next to each other in fits of anger and just, you know, step back for a second and say, okay, what am I really angry about? Is it the fact that like they kicked their shoes off in the living room and didn't put them where I wanted them to be? Is that really what's angering me? Or is it the fact that I don't feel listened to? Or is it something, you know, deeper? Because it's usually something deeper.
And both parties have to be, you know, have to be willing to participate in that in order for that relationship to be healthy and aligned. Both parties have to be willing to sit and do that. And that's not always the case. One thing that I did want to bring up, you talk about how when you feel those feelings, you tap through them. And one of my, well, there's a couple of things that I do regularly. And one is the use of Bach flowers. I have specific flowers that I use for specific emotions. If I'm angry and resentful, I'll use like holly and willow. If I'm dealing with grief, I will use like Star of Bethlehem and maybe something like sweet chestnut. So I know those of you who are listening are not familiar with these flowers that I'm throwing out here, but there are 38 different Bach flowers, and they all do different things on an emotional and an energetic level in the body. So that's one of my favorite go-tos for processing all kinds of emotion. And then the other thing is that I speak out loud even when I'm alone. I don't necessarily process all my thoughts just internally. I actually speak them. I am very clairaudient. My gift comes very much through my ears. And so I process things auditorily, including my own thoughts. So while I spend a lot of time alone, I am actually verbalizing my thoughts and feelings, and that helps me to process them because I'm hearing my own voice. So that actually helps me a lot. Somebody might relate to that if they were a person who in school, in high school or college, if you were one of those people who could go to class and learn everything you needed to learn just by listening, and you never had to open the book, and you could still take the test and do well. That's one of those clairaudient skills, and that was me. So it shows up in lots of ways, but that's one of those ways that a lot of people can relate to it. There were 3 things that really came to mind when I was thinking about what's the best way, what's the best process, aside from allowing yourself to feel the feelings and, you know, going through all of the logic and the acceptance and all of that stuff. When these storms of life come, really, what's the best way to move through it successfully? And I had three different thoughts in that. And the first one is gratitude. When you're hurting, when life is hard, find something to be grateful for in that moment, even if it's little, even if it's, very minuscule. I have a bouquet of fresh daisies sitting on my dining table right now that were gifted to me by the local florist. I went in this past weekend, and for no other reason, out of the goodness of her heart, she gave me daisies in a beautiful vase. And so, every time I look at those flowers on my table, I just think I'm really grateful for these beautiful daisies and for the generosity of the person who gifted them to me. Not a big deal, but it's just something in the moment to be grateful for. And of course, I have lots to be grateful for,
Yeah.
but I think having that gratitude practice is especially important in those difficult moments. So that's the first thing. The second thing is acceptance of what is, even if it's not what you want it to be. Because if we resist it, if we fight against it, it's just going to push back at us. When we can accept it, when we can accept it and be like, okay, this is not what I would have chosen, but this is what is right now. So I'm going to accept this for what is and let it be. That's the second thing. And the third thing, ideally, is something that we would already have in place anyway. But that is a vision that drives you forward. Because if you have a vision for your life, whether it's a long-term goal, a short-term goal, a big place you're going, something you're trying to do, something you're trying to create, if you have this vision that is driving you forward in life on a regular basis, it gives you something to focus on and continue to strive for, even in the midst of the storm, even in the midst of the pain. You can still turn around and look at something else. You can still say, well, yes, this happened and it hurt me and I'm heartbroken over it, but I'm still moving forward in this direction. I still have this place I'm going. I still have this thing I'm creating. So ideally, we have that vision in some way, shape, or form all the time. And it's going to be ever changing, ever evolving as life goes on. But if you don't have something like that in your life, I think it makes it a lot easier to kind of sink down into that pit when those things show up.
Yeah. And as far as having like a vision, it doesn't even have to be a detailed vision. Like I have this big idea of something that I wanted to create, but I don't exactly know what that looks like yet. I'm still living my day to day, going through and just acting on listening to my intuition, acting on my urges and all of these things. But I don't know all the details. I know that there's something big I'm creating. And so when I'm moving through my daily life, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, God brings the biggest challenges to his best soldiers or something like that. And when I sat to look at that, I was thinking about how when I'm going into this big vision. So everything on my path is being brought to me exactly when it's ready to be looked at. So, in saying that, it's kind of saying like my soul is going to bring forward what is ready to be looked at that time. So that trigger, is probably something that I need to look at. It is something I need to look at that time. And and I'm ready, and it's the time and it's the place, and we're doing this. So, and that's what I'm saying about like, I just live my life, and as things come up, because I know where I'm headed. I've declared it. I know where I'm headed. I know the emotions I want to feel. I know the freedom and I know what I want. I know what I'm going towards. And this is why I say I help people to transform their energetic blueprint, because that's what I do for myself every day is I am transforming the energetic blueprint of what is coming to me by looking at those emotions, because that is the energetic blueprint. It's those emotions, all the things that are stuck in our body, in our nervous system. That is the blueprint. So in transforming that, it's just living the life and knowing where you're going so that you can make decisions based on what you want and based on where you're going without being attached to the outcome. Now that's a whole nother thing, because and that's a worldly thing that we're taught to, is attaching to that outcome, attaching to, I always tell people, like, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm like, in 3 or 4 years. And if I'm not, then maybe my timing was off, but I know it's coming.
Right.
I know it's coming no matter what. So maybe my timing's off. I'm working through what I'm working through to get there. And the timing doesn't really matter as much. And so disconnecting and letting go of the timing and the results and all of the things, and knowing that if you're following your triggers and you're following your intuition and you're following those urges to take action, you will get to where you're going, because there's no other way. That's the way that you've chosen.
Yeah.
So, and it may shift, like you said, that big vision I have, it may shift. It may, and that's when you add the details, those details may change. And as you go on, 3 triggers ago, I may have thought something completely different about my life. And now as I'm going through, I'm like, well, I only wanted that because someone told me I should want that. That's not what I really want. So it's not only having a vision, but not being attached to the vision, because like you said, it can change and shift and
So, well, and it evolves as we do this work, because if you think about yourself 10 years ago, before you started doing this work, or I think about myself 10 years ago before I started doing this work, I never would have envisioned anything for my life like what I see now.
Yeah.
Because I still had all of that stuff stuck in me. I still had all of that unraveling to do. I still had all of that deprogramming and deconditioning to do. So there was no way that I could see what my life was supposed to be, because I was blinded by all of that stuff that I was holding on to. So I think in part of the process of doing all of this work and addressing all of these triggers as they come up, that's how we actually get to see what we're here to do. That's how the vision actually gets created and evolves and gets bigger and more powerful and more amazing. The more we do the work and the more we clear out and the more we are really aligning with our true essence. But I do want to say as well, because not everybody's at that point. There's some people, there's some people who have lived, 70 plus years on this life and still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. They still have no idea why they're here or what they want to do, because they haven't done the work. They're still sitting in the same place. They're no different at 70 than they were at 20. And it's very unfortunate, but it's a thing. So I think even if you're in that place where you still haven't done the inner work and you have no idea what your big vision would be, I still think it's important to have little goals. I mean, maybe you're trying to you want to run a marathon, and so you're working your training to run a marathon, and that doesn't have anything to do with the grand vision for your life, but it's 3 months from now, you're going to be running 26 miles and you're training to do it. So this other thing, this fastball comes and hits you in the head, and you can still turn around and say, okay, but I'm training for this marathon. So I'm still going to go focus on this. I'm still going to look at this goal. I'm still going to move forward with this goal, despite the fact that this has come into my realm.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say that, because it doesn't always have to be the grand vision of life. It can be a smaller, more attainable daily goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And this is where the radical responsibility comes in, because if you had asked me 10 years ago what my vision was for my life, and I would have had no idea, I would probably would have said the same thing. All I knew was that life can be better than this, is that I don't have to live this way. That's all I knew at that point. That was my vision at that point. I know that life is I don't have to be tired in toxic relationships and, beat down by life. I don't have to live that way. And so I decided, and it was all about that decision. I decided that I'm going to take full radical responsibility. And even if something comes into my awareness that I don't like, I know that it came there for a reason. So like, what is it? What's the reason here? And so that responsibility, because as humans, we don't want to feel bad things about ourselves. We don't want to look at ourselves and say, oh, so you're saying I attracted this abusive relationship? Yes. You know, and that was difficult for me at first, because everywhere I read, it was like the victim, the victim, the victim. And I've talked about this many times before too, but I had to stand and say, okay, but like, this is the life I'm living in. This is the life that I know I don't want to live. So I'm going to take responsibility to create the life I want to live. And that is very, very important, because we can literally create whatever we want. It will take some work. They're like, I was very privileged, and I had a very cushy life to where it was easier for me than it is for some people. And I totally understand that, but it is absolutely possible for anyone. And it just may take a little more work. But yeah, just if you don't have a vision, just knowing that there's something more out there. There's something. And I remember thinking that so many times when I was in the midst of a toxic relationship, thinking like, this is not what I'm here for. I'm not here to, like, yes, this is part of it. And that was the rock bottom of my awakening of, this is just not doing it for me. And I'm not going to live my whole life this way. And so many people need to hit that rock bottom in order to take the responsibility. And I absolutely needed that rock bottom.
Yeah.
And now I look back, and after doing like layers and layers of healing on it, now I can look back and have the gratitude and say, wow, like at the moment that seemed really horrible, but now I'm grateful that that happened. And so it doesn't have to be a big vision. Just I'm going to take responsibility for my happiness.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once you declare that, it's going to come, the things are going to come at you. And that's why when you declare that, and then it looks like your life is falling apart, it's not.
Because it's all showing up to give you exactly what you asked for.
It's unraveling for you to remember exactly who you are and where you're going. Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's all showing up to give you exactly what you asked for. Yes.
Absolutely.
And what are we at? Today is the 18th of January. And a couple of weeks ago, I said my word for the year is unencumbered, and it's showing up to make me unencumbered indeed. So yeah, I get that. Yeah. And for some people, I can tell you that my rock bottom was a literal death wish. Sitting on the sofa, staring at the wall, literally wanting to die for a long time. And I had to come to a point where I was like, okay, either I'm going to leave this world or I'm going to do what I have to do to get out of this situation that is creating all of this. So yeah, and I'm still sitting here. So yeah, I made the right choice. But yeah, sometimes that's all the vision is. It has to be. Do you want to die or do you want to live? That was my choice in that moment. And so.
And you even have that choice. And, even when you're being triggered, you have the choice. If you're like, oh, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. And then what you want isn't coming about. It's still your responsibility. You can ask again, and the things will be shown to you again. there's never a, it's always just a decision
Mhm.
and a declaration, and you can literally create anything that you want.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for our listeners and watchers out there, if this resonates with you and you would like to talk to both of us or either of us, if you are interested in learning more about tapping or Bach flowers or what we do and how we do it, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out. Our contact information is in the show notes, and we would love to hear from you and get to know you and assist you if you need it.
Yes,
So
thank you.
yeah, this has been a good talk today.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. See you later.